Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money and expect to get more viewers than Donald Trump's State of the Union. It is another wonderful day in the neighborhood here on Manage Your Damn Money. I am, of course, Ben Carter, the co-host and co-creator of Manage Your Damn Money. And I'm joined here by always my trusty co-host, Mr. Malcolm Ethridge, licensed financial advisor. Malcolm, what's going on with you, man?
Not too much, man. I'm happy to be here. It's
Indeed.
cold again.
It's cold again. Like winter came, then left, then came back.
Right. The spring pump faked us a little bit, and then winter showed back up.
I was thinking it was coming. But this, of course, is a really special show for us. This is a show where what we've been talking about on social media for a while now. We are now here in the studios of Montgomery Community Media in a new place, a new home, shooting the show. So we're really excited about that, right, Malcolm?
Very excited. Like, the set is way more than, we're a long way from YouTube. In just a short, 18 months, something like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're super thankful for the people at Montgomery Community Media who decided to produce Manage Your Damn Money in full and in the way that we always thought it could be. So really
in high def, too.
In high def.
I'm not sure if I should be in high def, but I'll take it.
Indeed. And also a couple quick notes. The podcast actually won't change. Manage Your Damn Money will still be available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and also SoundCloud. Occasionally we might throw up the video version here and there.
Why not?
Right? I think we'll do it. But other than that, we're just going to continue to give you a great show with some great quality. But as we do on every episode of MYDM, it is now time for headlines. And of course, in this episode, headlines, Malcolm, it's been a while since we've been on the show. So it's important that we actually give folks some updates.
New year, new us.
New year, new us. New year, new me. And we have some things that have gone on in since we've actually last been on the show. But how's 2018 been for you so far?
2018 so far has been pretty good.
Okay.
So I have new financial goals, which I'm not super excited about because that's money that I can't spend.
Right.
But a highlight for 2017 while we're on it, though, I paid off my student loan.
Congratulations,
which
brother.
was like the number one financial priority I had for the year.
You trying to help me with mine now?
Talk to me after the show.
Okay.
But that was like, my biggest thing that I said, and I actually got it done in mid-December.
Right.
So it took the whole year, but,
That's a big deal, man. You free.
Free at last.
Indeed. Well, also some big news. We talked about this, off camera, but you bought a new car.
With my student loan money that I don't have to spend anymore. I wish it was the same.
Right.
No, but yeah, so folks who watched or listened to, I don't know which one of our last episodes it was that I was boo-hooing about having to buy a new car eventually because my 2009 Altima was starting to have a heart attack.
Right.
But it finally got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
And I've been putting off buying a new car because once you get that car paid off and you don't have that monthly note anymore, something about taking on new monthly payment just doesn't seem right. But, I fought it as long as I could. Here we are.
Right. What kind of car did you get?
Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Jeep Grand Cherokee. That sounds like a big, nice car, sir.
It's decent. So I had my sights set on a BMW X6.
Oh,
that
what?
was the thing that when I bought the Altima, I said, when I trade this thing in, the car that I want, the SUV that I want is a BMW X6. Like that was and then when the time came, that's still not the tax bracket that I'm in to feel comfortable shelling out that kind of money. So the Grand Cherokee was a nice compromise between me and myself. That's essentially what it.
Right. Well, that's big news and big stuff. Malcolm got himself a new car payment and a new whip, but no student loans, which is huge.
Right.
I have some news which is really crazy.
Which
and
is
this is
5 times bigger at least.
And this is kind of the kind of news where this is actually the first time I'm talking about it publicly. But my wife and I signed on a dotted line for a home build in Maryland. And we're going through the process, but we're signed up and all squared away for, buying a home.
The guy who said he would never buy a house.
I could barely even say it out loud. But part of there was a whole reasoning for it. Where it is,
please do tell.
Let me explain it to you.
I'm very curious.
Indeed, let me explain it to you. It's real. The location. It's a new build, so the place hasn't even been built yet. Secondly, it's next to a grocery store.
Okay.
Then it's also across the street from a mall.
Okay.
That's quickly being fixed up.
And are you a senior citizen that needs a grocery store to be walkable?
I'm talking about property value, sir.
Oh,
property value here,
me.
sir.
Okay.
And then when it comes to where it is, it's right near the metro. So it's like literally walking steps from a metro stop. So when I kept looking at it, it kept like nagging at me, check it out. So I did and actually learned more about it. And when I checked it out and looked at it, one of the incentives for actually getting involved with it and with the builder was $12,500 contributed towards closing costs. Mm-hmm. And we all know that closing costs are incredible, ridiculous fees that are tacked on to the whole home buying process, right. Which makes it almost impossible for the average person to afford, at least immediately.
Or at least deters you.
Right. It definitely puts you in a different path for some. And when I saw that and we did the math, we looked up and we were like, wait a minute. We can kind of semi-do this and do it in a place and location that we expect to retain its value.
Look at you doing adult things.
Making
adult decisions.
Indeed. So
what's interesting, though, and we talked about this off camera, but I find it funny, is that you and I both know that you would be perfectly happy being one of those tiny home, converted container community RV park somewhere kind of people. So I know who lean in the direction of making this decision.
Well, actually, you'll be surprised. I actually pushed this a lot further than
really.
Did. Yeah, and I think probably because I saw it strictly, primarily through two lenses. Number one, this is an incredible quote unquote investment in terms of its ability to keep value. Sure. We can resell it certainly close to what we're getting, if not more, and we could also rent it because it's in a university area.
Right.
Even my friends of mine stayed in a apartment complex that's like around the corner from it when I was in college. So it's still kind of a place where college students are and where you can, probably make some money down the line if we just use it in a different way. So I was actually the one who drove this, believe it or not.
I don't believe it. So put me in the not category.
Okay, indeed. We're talking about some really big purchases here,
sure.
Malcolm. What are some things, if people have some big goals, whether it's paying off student loans, getting a new car, getting into a home, what are some of the things that people need to start thinking about at the beginning of a year to do one of those?
First of all, you got to write it down.
Okay.
Because a goal without a plan is just a wish.
Right.
That's what somebody far smarter than me once told me, and I've stuck with it ever since. Mm-hmm. So the very first and foremost, you just got to write it down, and also constantly write it down. So rewrite that plan over and over, especially the closer you get to it, so you can kind of check in and say, okay, my plan was to save $12,000. I'm 3 months into the year and I've saved $3,000. So I'm 25% to goal.
Right.
So rewriting that down, now I'm saving $7,500. Sounds a lot, easier to do than I need to save the full whatever I'm doing for the year. So writing it down, holding yourself accountable, maybe even having an accountability partner is something that you consider doing. If you have a spouse, it's probably a lot easier than you want it to be to have an accountability partner.
Right.
But those things especially, write it down, hold yourself, hold your feet to the fire, so to speak.
Right.
That helps.
Okay. Yeah, people will be surprised what happens when you actually write something down. You might scare yourself and make the thing come true. Before we go to a quick break, for you and I, we need some advice because we got these big expenses ahead of us. What are some keys to maintaining our recent or almost about to happen major life purchases like buying a car and buying a home? Like, what do we need to do to maintain that thing?
Well, so this might be hard for you to believe, but I strategized for at least 12 months
on
knowing that eventually that expense was coming up.
Right.
So I had been saving about $100 a month just to be in the habit of putting that to the side.
Right.
That ended up going toward my down payment.
Okay.
Separately from that, I spent about 12 months just cutting waste.
Right.
So, getting my insurance payments as low as I could get them.
Right.
As you know, I cut out cable, so there's, an expense that's gone. I bought a router myself instead of renting it from the cable company, so that saved like $12 a month. Simple things like that add up. I mean, that's, after I got done taking inventory of it, that was like half of what my car payment ended up being that I cut out of my budget over the course of 2017 as this impending purchase was coming. So it's very rare that something catches me off guard and I end up having to just throw a whole bunch of money at it at one time.
Right.
So since you know it's coming, start getting ready for it way ahead of time.
My advice to myself is to maintain these things as
Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath and stay employed.
Oh, that too. Absolutely that too.
Very important. So we're going to take a quick break right here on Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. But when we come back, we have the conversation at hand, which is impactful money news stories from the start of 2018. We're going to take a look at things that are ahead and things that are coming up that we think are important for you to know. This is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. We are back on our first show of 2018. We want to remind people, if you have a question that you want to send in, we're actually restarting Malcolm's Money Minute. Send that question in to info@manageyourdamnmoney.com, and Malcolm will answer your question, and we'll talk about it a bit. Also, if you have a music selection that you'd like us to play during a break on our show, send it to us again. Get us a conversation started. info@manageyourdamnmoney.com, and you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Just search Manage Your Damn Money. And this episode, our conversation at hand, impactful money news stories from the start of 2018. We've been off for some time, and there are some major items in the news, and at the start of this year, we think you should be aware of some of these stories. In this episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we're taking a look at the top story items and how they can impact your pockets and what you need to be aware of in 2018. So Malcolm, 2018, it's already been a bunch of stuff going on in the news. But one interesting story that actually came out only a few days ago, the headline read, Octavia Spencer says Jessica Chastain helped her get 5 times her salary. She is walking the walk. Now, I'm not sure if you know who Octavia Spencer is, but she's an actress, and so is Jessica Chastain. They both appeared in the movie The Help. Mm-hmm. And this was an IndieWire article by Jude Dry, which recounted how actress Jessica Chastain helped Octavia Spencer earn 5 times more than what she had been paid previously by brokering a quote-unquote favored nations deal, bundling their salaries to get more than what either originally asked for. And I had actually never heard of I've never heard of favored nations before this story. But apparently what happened was Octavia shared that women of color needed to be included in the equitable pay conversation, and Jessica Chastain took a bold step in attaching her pay to Octavia's for film. Octavia Spencer shared this story on a panel at the Sundance Film Festival covering women breaking barriers. The quote from Octavia actually said, "I love that woman because she's walking the walk and she's actually talking the talk," she said. "Octavia, we're going to get you paid on this film," she said, that Jessica Chastain said. "You and I are going to be tied together. We're going to have a favored nations deal, and we're going to make the same thing. Fast forward to last week, we're making 5 times what we asked for," said Spencer. So that was an interesting story about one actor or actress tying themselves to another and saying, you basically have to pay us the same amount.
Right.
What was your reaction when you first read this story, man?
I was extremely shocked.
Okay.
So to the point you were alluding to before, I had no idea who Jessica Chastain was, to be completely honest. I did know who Octavia Spencer was because I've seen her in a few different movies, most notably, besides The Help, probably Hidden Figures.
Okay, yeah.
So, and also Saturday Night Live, when she hosted and pointed out that she's only ever been allowed to play a nurse before that. Like 19 times or something on TV she's played a nurse. But anyway, so my first reaction, I was blown away.
Okay.
I also was shocked by the fact that they both were speaking so publicly about it.
Really?
Which is somewhat of a risk in the sense that you don't want to embarrass the person who you just negotiated with by celebrating that you just negotiated them off of whatever.
Right.
But in this case, I think the tone that they ended up taking eventually was, we're celebrating this production company for doing the right thing in hopes that it will make everybody else see the light and act accordingly.
Right.
Not so much, we put our foot in their behind and said, pay us what you owe us.
Right.
So I was also very shocked that they agreed.
Right.
Like that the production company actually said yes. Right. Especially a 5x difference. Right. Like we're not talking about a bump of $5,000.
Right.
We're talking about a bump of 5 times your pay rate. Could you imagine if your employer paid you 5 times your pay rate?
I might be able to pay off my student loans.
She might be able to buy 5 times the house, right? Like that is just a significant jump to have happen to you overnight. So, it had to happen eventually. I'm glad that it's sooner than later, I guess is the way to look at it.
And it's interesting because there's a whole movement now. Obviously, we've seen women kind of linking arms and saying we're going to be accountable for one another and help one another. Do you see this trend? I mean, Hollywood's one thing, right? Because we're talking about movies, big production budgets, and everything else. Is there any way that something like this could filter down into regular life?
I think yes. To take a very indirect approach to answering that question for a second, I think part of it is that the world is getting younger.
Okay.
And the country itself is becoming more and more diverse. And so people have more and more diverse views. And so we're getting away from the views that have gotten us to the places where all these powerful corporate executives have had to step down or been fired from their company because of conduct unbecoming. I guess is the way that folks are getting out of having to say exactly what happened.
Right.
I say call a thing, but that's a totally different conversation. But I think as the workforce gets younger, we get away from those kind of protections that used to exist. And all of a sudden, now people are more aware of what affects their neighbor and not just living in their bubble.
Right.
We have less and less people who subscribe only to Fox News views and start to see, the world differently. So I think the younger the workforce gets, probably the more likely this happens. And part of where I was saying is kind of a roundabout. Part of the reason I say that is because the United States, for the 3rd year in a row now, there have been more students enrolling into first grade who are quote-unquote minorities than there are quote-unquote majority students, which means that 18 years from now, that workforce is going to look a lot less like it has for the last whatever this country has been established, right? However many hundreds of years this country's been established. So eventually it starts to filter itself out. It's just going to take some time, and a lot more stories like this.
Absolutely. I wonder how this would be applied to like an actual real life scenario. Like, can you think of any way? Like, I couldn't.
This is a real life scenario.
It is real life, but it's the movies. It's Hollywood, and so there's a difference in how that's negotiated. It's negotiated on a case by case situation, right? Whereas you go into work, and that's your situation until further notice. And so I wonder, and you typically don't come in with anyone attached to you or anyone that you know. So how do you end up doing something like that? Or is it something where you do it once you've gotten to know somebody in particular at the job? Or like, how does this apply to like a more common situation?
Well, you know what? Part of it we spoke about in a previous show. I don't remember which show it was because we've been off for a while. Right. But it was the show where we pointed out that New York had just made it law that employers were no longer allowed to ask potential employees, for past salary history. So things like that are pretty simple, right? In principle, are what's going to make that shift to the broader market versus just Hollywood or just, athletics or entertainment industry as a whole, you know, that kind of thing. Because I get your point. It's kind of siloed, completely different world. You and I aren't walking in tomorrow to sign a contract for $5 million to do one project that takes 6 months and then go home and do something else. So I get that. But I think simple things like changing laws around pay gap, pay equity, makes a significant enough difference. And
absolutely.
Eventually, and I know people don't like to hear the word eventually, because I'd rather have my coins today, not hear about what they could be tomorrow. But I think eventually we get there.
That makes sense.
But in the words of the great American philosopher Earl Simmons, AKA DMX, y'all been eating long enough. Now stop being greedy. That essentially is the way that I view this whole scope of what we're talking about. It's time to just come on.
Indeed. That's very wise words. We're gonna get ready to take another break here on Manage Your Damn Money. The conversation at hand is the impactful money news stories from the start of 2018. But on the other side of this break, we're going to have Malcolm's Money Minute, so get ready for that. Remind you can always listen to past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you have a question, concern, or comment, send it to us at info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back.
Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. One question we get here pretty frequently is whether or not it's possible to refinance your home too often, or how do I know when it's time to refinance? Since interest rates have been hovering around historical lows for a few years now, this is definitely a practical question. As with any financial decision, the choice should come down to how much is it going to cost you versus how much could it potentially save you. For homeowners who purchased their homes more than 4 to 5 years ago, it's very possible that a refinance will make sense for you. Any shorter than that, and it could be too soon. This is because when you get into a traditional 30-year fixed mortgage, the first 4 to 5 years worth of mortgage payments go primarily to interest. So unless your home has been appreciating rapidly, you wouldn't have gotten a chance to start paying down much of that principal. You'll have to also calculate your break-even point, and as Ben mentioned earlier, take into account how much closing costs will be once you refinance. As a general rule of thumb, the lower the new interest rate is, the sooner you'll reach your break-even. So keep all of that in mind as you make that decision. I'm Malcolm Ethridge, licensed financial advisor, and this has been your Money Minute.
Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money. Good advice from Mr. Malcolm. If you have a question or a thought you'd like to have Malcolm respond to, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Mine is at MYDM with a 1 on the end. Malcolm, what's yours?
At Malcolm on Money.
Absolutely. In today's conversation at hand, impactful money news stories from the start of 2018. Another headline that we pulled, Malcolm, this is all the rage, and we still have to do a full show on this topic because we haven't. You and I were both kind of like hating the idea of actually doing it, but it's to the point where we have to do it now. CoinCheck confirms crypto hack loss larger than Mt. Gox. I don't know who Mt. Gox is, but somebody got hacked for their crypto money.
Right.
CoinDesk article by Daniel Palmer recaps a Tokyo-based cryptocurrency exchange called CoinCheck being hacked in January. So this was recent. In a January press conference, the exchange's president, I'm not even going to try and say these Japanese names, estimated its loss of $58 billion yen, which is approximately $533 million. According to Bloomberg, which attended the conference, 500 million NEM tokens were taken from CoinCheck's digital wallets. Notably, the dollar amount stolen from CoinCheck is likely greater than the amount stolen from Mt. Gox, which I guess is another kind of crypto company in 2014. Another exchange, okay. Pegged at 340 million, though the impact of the cryptocurrency market will be much smaller given the immense increase in market and capitalization since. So this was interesting. I don't even remember where I came across this, but everyone's talking about Bitcoin, Litecoin, it's all the rage. And this is really the first time we're giving any kind of time to this topic on the show. But this, I mean, to me, this highlights, for me personally, the very core of the problem with the rage behind these digital currencies is because you have to take what people tell you at their word in terms of how it works.
Right.
And then you have to trust that it is quote unquote secure, which in this case we see that it is not necessarily secure.
Well, not only the security issue, because you're right, this is like the third, I think, of such hacks like this in the last
few years.
13 months, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And we're talking about millions of dollars, right? But the biggest problem is, to the point you made earlier, 99, I think, % of the people who you ask, why do they own one of these coins or what it does, they couldn't tell you.
Right.
If you gave them 40 sentences to explain it to you, they probably still couldn't tell you. And
you got to get in, Malcolm.
And that's basically all everybody keeps saying. I just know I need to buy it.
Right.
Well, that's kind of how the .com bubble came and went in the early 2000s too, right? Like, I don't really know what Ben.com does, but it's been going up and going up, so I'm buying it. That's kind of been people's attitude towards it. So, as you know, my number one rule of thumb when it comes to investing is I don't invest in things I don't understand.
Right.
I have done a lot of reading about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin specifically. I've watched a couple documentaries on Netflix because, you know, I turn into a nerd at night. And I still don't understand it enough to say I feel secure, safe and secure enough to put any money into this thing. Like, the fact that it can be hacked the fact that it's not backed by the full faith and credit of anything.
Right.
There's no gold bars in a vault somewhere guaranteeing the value of it. It's all based on some guy who is invisible, because Satoshi Nakamura is a ghost. Nobody knows who this person is to date, right? So it's been on 10 years since Bitcoin was invented. Nobody knows who this guy is. So I just don't trust that kind of situation where all those details are missing. Whereas if I walked into 7-Eleven and said, I want to buy this soda, I handed them two $1 bills. We agree that those two $1 bills are worth $2. I don't have to worry about what does the internet say that this Bitcoin is worth in this moment that I walk into the store, and so yeah, later for that.
What should people do? Because I actually spoke on a panel not too long ago, and I had a young lady come up to me, and she legit said, my friend, she has a friend that's like pushing her toward you got to get in.
Everybody has that
people
friend.
Say, you got to go buy your lottery ticket because it's about to go through the roof. It's $500 million, right? What do people do if they're getting pressure or feel pressure for the moment that we're in, because there is a lot of excitement around these different cryptocurrencies? I liken it to lottery tickets because in a lot of ways that's how I kind of see it. What should people do about like that energy and that interest in this particular thing?
Well, I mean, I would just say remember that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it usually tends to rhyme, right? So I just liken this whole scenario to the .com bubble, and noticed I use the word bubble, which means at some point it's got to burst. It comes tumbling down. And if you were one of the people who was so unfortunate that you bought at the very height of this whole thing around, 3 months ago maybe, where it was just like every single day we're talking about new high after new high, it might be time to consider, getting some new friends, because they shouldn't be steering you into things that are going to cost you money, unless it's brunch. I'm okay with my friends steering me into brunch, but aside from that,
I think it's definitely a tough situation, because it feels like you're losing out in the moment, like you might miss out and you can make a whole lot of money. But to what you always say is true here, nothing is given away in America, especially for free. And so, there's a great risk that's coming in dealing with something that is so heavily speculated on, like Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies. And I think it's like over 100 of them now.
Oh, it's more than that. Because
which I almost like.
The thing is, you can create it from nothing. That's kind of the point. Like, a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. For every dollar that's thrown into circulation, the U.S. Federal Reserve sets on fire an equal dollar that's older, but takes $1 out of circulation for every new dollar that comes into circulation. With these cryptocurrencies, new ones can be created just by me pressing a couple keys on my keyboard, setting the algorithm to duplicate itself every so often, and then calling it a day, which I believe is the case with Bitcoin. Like,
that's
it's set
it
to continue to split off so that it dilutes the value of the ones that are already in existence
over time
by issuing new ones over time. But like, what's to say that somebody, if 3 people have figured out how to hack, these different coin exchanges in just 13 months, what's to say someone won't figure out how to start selling fake Bitcoin? The U.S. Federal Reserve has to keep changing the design of our dollar bills every so often, because people keep figuring out how to duplicate them. If I can figure out how to duplicate actual paper money, I can definitely figure out how to duplicate a computer program, Like, so,
You know what I think? I think Satoshi Nakamura is just sitting waiting until everybody's in Bitcoin, and then he gets the key, or he or she gets the key and unlocks it and takes everything, and everybody be like, I lost my money, I lost my Bitcoin.
Well, one last thing on this. The way that I can be absolutely sure that we have nothing to worry about, take a look at the State of the Union address when you get home and look at all of the people who make the laws that govern the way you and I live. Do any of those people look like they're going to be buying Bitcoin anytime soon? Until those 92-year-old senators and Congress people decide that they're going to start buying Bitcoin and actually make it a real thing, I have a feeling our dollar is safe.
Okay, well, we'll see about that, Malcolm. We could be the old men sitting here screaming at people from the porch. But anyway, this is Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Another impactful story for 2018 that we actually pulled. This is an interesting housing story. We've been talking about housing and the impact that it has on your pockets and the pockets of millennials everywhere. The headline read, "This startup is making it easier to afford an apartment in San Francisco." A January Business Insider article by Julie Melia Robinson. She has one of those names you gotta say.
You like tearing people's names up.
I don't even. This is a regular name too. Shares news about a startup that works to convert living rooms in apartments to an extra bedroom to help reduce the cost of rent. In San Francisco, desperate renters are finding their real estate bliss in converted living rooms that lease for as little as $1,100 a month because elbow room is an overrated amenity. HomeShare, which is the name of the startup, leases apartments in expensive new buildings and then splices them into additional units so more tenants can split the rent for less per person. A 2-bedroom becomes fit for 3 after HomeShare installs an upholstered partition in the den. The company pockets a cut of the rent, like a finder's fee. Each of HomeShare's customers get their own bedroom, a closet, and a private shared bedroom. And the price, again, starts in the range of $1,100 depending upon the price of the whole rent. And then HomeShare accomplishes the split of space by installing like these fabricated wall installations. And I saw a picture of it, Malcolm. It's kind of like I don't even know how to. You remember how in school, in elementary school, at least in California, they used to split a room with these like air walls, or like in a hotel they'll do air walls.
And they pull out
and
from
they
the
fold.
door. Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of one of those, and I guess like a closet or small spaces for storage are built in. But isn't this just like a glorified dormitory?
I know, because at least in the dorm you were paying a reasonable rate. $1,100 to live in somebody's converted living room sounds like a nightmare.
Right.
Like you might as well live in a hostel at that point.
Seriously.
And I have no interest.
Absolutely zero private time.
Your home state of California is that explains why you don't live there.
That's one of the reasons.
And this is from a person who complains all the time about how outrageous DC's cost of living and housing situations are, where we got all these different high-rise apartment buildings that are going up. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I know the folks in Montgomery County are going to kill me for saying this, but I really hope Amazon doesn't land here. I just don't want it.
Okay.
Like, the rent is already high enough.
Right.
But separately from that, I look at people who live in situations like this. You got the folks who are living on houseboats out in San Francisco.
I legit know
the RV parks. You got
my wife knows somebody whose friend or relative lives on a boat in San Francisco.
Move. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. If DC ever got to a point where I am now splitting a shoebox, a studio apartment with 2 people with a partition running between it and somebody living on the countertop,
right.
Like at that point, I've got to start to open up my list of the states that I told you I'm never, ever, ever going to move to, no matter how much somebody pays me.
Right.
Well, now all of a sudden Texas doesn't look so bad because I'm not living in a partitioned off living room and paying somebody real money.
Right.
Maybe for free. Maybe if you invited me to come live with you for free, and that was the way to do it, I could figure out how to make that work. These people in San Francisco command some of the highest wages in America.
Indeed, they do.
And they live like this. What is going on?
It doesn't seem to match up in a lot of ways. But housing is still the greatest expense we all face. Do you think like co-dwelling situations like this, because I've seen them popping up more and more, describing this article, will that continue to be something that millennials have to like come to terms with?
I hope not, but I think yes.
Okay.
As I'm looking at like the co-working spaces, like WeWork, for example, they're also starting to put in the same building as your WeWork upstairs co-living spaces that operate the exact same way. You're sharing beds, you're sharing futons, and, bathrooms with 20 people, like the dorms on A Different World reruns I watched. And I'm watching that like, man, who could live like that?
Right.
Fast forward 20 years, people are going toward that way of living, saying, sign me up. Like, no, thank you. No.
That's funny. Do you see, so, I mean, we're almost at the end of the show, but do you see any forces changing this trend of cramming more people into smaller spaces? Like, what would it take? Would it take legislation? Would it take, like, just a paradigm shift in terms of what it means to be profitable? Because I don't see any real end to it.
You know what I think? For San Francisco specifically, I think what it'll take and what's inevitably going to happen is the San Francisco, Palo Alto, Silicon Valley bubble burst.
Okay.
And people are already starting to take a bit more negative stance on Silicon Valley than they used to have 10 years ago.
Right.
Especially when we look at like the articles we've covered recently, where all of a sudden people are starting to say maybe these folks don't have our best interest at heart.
Yeah.
As that happens more and more, and it becomes less enticing for young people coming out of college to want to move there.
Right.
Also, places like New York and Boston that are trying to tout themselves as Silicon Alley and Silicon East.
Right.
As places like that actually grab some footing and draw that talent away from places like that, I see all of a sudden things returning to normalcy. Because you're talking about a place where doctors who command some of the highest incomes in the United States / the world can't afford to live in these neighborhoods.
Right.
That just tells you that everything is askew at that point.
Right.
Like, we've got to, come on,
and
let's
it's not
be realistic.
It's not at all sustainable.
You know, if I'm a cosmetic dentist and I'm sharing a 3-bedroom apartment with strangers, something is wrong. This model's not sustainable. So I do think eventually that bubble bursts, and all of a sudden, folks start flocking to other nearby areas like maybe Phoenix or Seattle.
Indeed. Well, this has been our first episode of Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm in our new home, our new studio here at Montgomery Community Media. Malcolm, I think we did okay.
I think we did pretty well too.
We did all right, man. Good. Congratulations.
We need to install an applause track so that I can give myself some praise.
Indeed. We want to remind people you can always catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just search Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm. Also, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us go up in the ratings. If you have a question or concern or comment, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. Thanks to our crew here at Montgomery Community Media. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.